The rain hammered against the glass walls of the Meridian Financial Building as Joshua Mitchell adjusted his Italian silk tie one final time. At 34, he had built an empire from nothing, transforming a small accounting firm into one of Chicago's most prestigious financial consulting companies. His corner office on the 42nd floor overlooked the bustling streets below, where ordinary people scurried like ants, completely unaware that their financial destinies often passed through his hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Joshua's morning routine was as precise as his business strategy. Black coffee, no sugar. Market reports by 6:30 a.m. First meeting at 7:15 sharp. Today was no different, except for the storm that had been brewing since dawn, turning the October morning into something resembling twilight. "Mr. Mitchell," his assistant Rebecca called through the intercom, "your 9 a.m. appointment with the Henderson Group has arrived." Joshua straightened his charcoal Armani suit jacket and walked toward the conference room. The Henderson Group represented a $12 million deal that would secure his company's position as the leading financial consultant for luxury real estate developments across the Midwest. This wasn't just business. It was the culmination of 18 months of careful negotiation and strategic positioning. The meeting began like clockwork. Charts, projections, handshakes, and the kind of corporate dialogue that had become Joshua's second language. Richard Henderson, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a commanding presence, seemed impressed by the preliminary numbers. "Mitchell, your reputation precedes you," Henderson said, leaning back in his leather chair. "I've heard you can turn water into wine when it comes to financial optimization." Joshua smiled confidently. "I prefer to think of it as turning potential into profit, Mr. Henderson. Our preliminary analysis shows we can increase your project's ROI by at least 37% within the first fiscal year." The numbers danced across the presentation screen like a symphony Joshua had conducted hundreds of times before. Revenue projections, tax optimization strategies, investment timelines, everything calculated to perfection. This was his domain, his kingdom of spreadsheets and financial forecasts. As the meeting progressed, Joshua noticed the storm outside intensifying. Lightning illuminated the conference room intermittently, creating dramatic shadows across the polished mahogany table. But he remained focused, discussing market volatility and risk assessment with the precision of a surgeon. "The Chicago market has shown remarkable resilience," Joshua explained, clicking to the next slide. "Even with the economic uncertainties we've faced this year, luxury developments in the Lincoln Park and Gold Coast areas have maintained their value. Your Lakefront Towers project sits perfectly within this sweet spot." Henderson nodded approvingly. "And what about the timeline? We're looking at breaking ground next spring." "Absolutely achievable," Joshua replied without hesitation. "Our financial structuring will ensure you have the necessary capital flow to maintain your construction schedule. We're talking about a seamless process from initial investment to project completion." The morning flew by in a blur of strategic discussions and calculated presentations. By 11:30, they had covered every aspect of the deal except the final signatures. Henderson seemed ready to commit, but wanted to review the contracts with his legal team over lunch. "Let's reconvene at 2 p.m., Henderson suggested, standing up and extending his hand. "I believe we have the foundation for a very profitable partnership." "Mr. Mitchell," Joshua shook hands firmly, feeling the familiar rush of a deal about to close. "I'll have the final documentation ready for review. Thank you for your confidence in Meridian Financial." As the Henderson Group filed out of the conference room, Joshua remained behind, organizing his materials and mentally preparing for the afternoon session. Rebecca appeared in the doorway with a stack of messages. "Sir, You have 17 calls to return, and the Morrison account needs your review before 3 p.m., she said, setting the papers on the table. Prioritize the Morrison review, Joshua instructed. Push my lunch to 1:15 and make sure the Henderson contracts are printed and bound. By 1:45, Rebecca nodded and disappeared back to her desk. Joshua walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the storm rage across the city. From his elevated position, Chicago looked like a miniature model, with tiny cars navigating streets that seemed no wider than pencil lines. He enjoyed this perspective, the view from above, where everything appeared manageable and controllable. His phone buzzed with a text from his younger brother Marcus. "Still on for dinner Sunday? Sarah wants to know if you're bringing anyone." Joshua typed, "Back quickly. Confirmed for Sunday, coming solo as usual." Marcus had been trying to set Joshua up with various women for the past 2 years, ever since Joshua's engagement to Victoria had ended. Victoria couldn't handle his work schedule, his dedication to building the company, his inability to prioritize their relationship above his career ambitions. She had called him emotionally unavailable and married to his job. Joshua saw it differently. He was focused, determined, and unwilling to settle for mediocrity in any aspect of his life. The rain continued its assault on the windows as Joshua reviewed the Henderson contracts one final time. Every clause had been scrutinized, every percentage calculated to ensure maximum benefit for both parties. This was what he excelled at, creating win-win scenarios that generated substantial profits while minimizing risks. At 12:45, Joshua decided to grab lunch from the deli across the street rather than ordering in. The storm had begun to subside. Slightly, though the wind still whipped through the urban canyon created by the surrounding skyscrapers. He grabbed his black umbrella and headed for the elevator. The Meridian Financial Building's lobby was a testament to modern corporate success. Marble floors, contemporary art installations, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Joshua nodded to the security guard and pushed through the revolving door into the Chicago afternoon. The contrast between his climate-controlled office environment and the raw energy of the storm was immediately apparent. Wind caught his umbrella, threatening to turn it inside out, while rain droplets found their way past his defenses despite his careful navigation. He quickened his pace toward Brennan's Deli, a small establishment that had somehow survived the gentrification of the neighborhood. Inside the deli, the warm atmosphere provided a stark contrast to the corporate sterility he had left behind. The smell of fresh bread and brewing coffee created an almost comforting environment. Joshua ordered his usual turkey and Swiss on rye, no mayo, with a side of fruit, and waited while the elderly owner, Mr. Brennan, prepared his sandwich with methodical care. "Terrible weather out there," Mr. Brennan commented, wrapping the sandwich in brown paper. "Hope it clears up before the evening commute?" Joshua nodded politely while checking his phone for messages. 3 missed calls from potential clients, 2 emails marked urgent, and a reminder about his 2 p.m. meeting. The digital demands of his success never paused, not even for lunch. As he prepared to leave the deli, Joshua's phone rang. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch, but Mr. Henderson's assistant just called. They want to move the meeting up to 1:30 if possible. Something about Mr. Henderson having to catch an earlier flight." Joshua glanced at his watch. 1:05 p.m. "That's fine. I'll be back in the office in 10 minutes. Make sure the conference room is ready." "Already taken care of, sir." Joshua tucked his phone away and headed back into the storm, his mind already shifting into deal-closing mode. The Henderson Group represented more than just revenue. It was validation of everything he had built, confirmation that his relentless pursuit of excellence had positioned him among Chicago's elite financial consultants. The wind had picked up again during his brief time in the deli, and Joshua found himself fighting against nature's force as he made his way back across the street. His expensive shoes splashed through puddles that had formed in the uneven sidewalk, and he made a mental note to have them polished before his next client meeting. As he approached the Meridian Financial Building, Joshua's focus was entirely on the afternoon ahead, the final negotiations, the contract signatures, the satisfaction of closing another major deal. He had no way of knowing that in less than 30 minutes, everything he thought he understood about success, about human connection, about what truly mattered in life, would be challenged in a way that would change him forever. Joshua stepped through the revolving door of the Meridian Financial Building, shaking droplets from his umbrella as he crossed the marble lobby. The security guard, Frank, gave him a knowing nod. "Cut it close today, Mr. Mitchell. Weather's got everyone running. Behind schedule." "Not me, Frank. Never behind schedule," Joshua replied with the confidence that had carried him through countless high-stakes negotiations. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual. Joshua used the time to mentally rehearse his closing arguments for the Henderson deal. He visualized each handshake, each signature, each moment that would solidify his company's reputation as the premier financial consulting firm in the region. Rebecca met him at the elevator doors with a tablet and a concerned expression. "Sir, there's been a complication with the Henderson meeting." Joshua's jaw tightened. Complications were obstacles to be eliminated, not accepted. What kind of complication? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mr. Henderson's flight was delayed due to the storm. They're pushing the meeting back to 3:30, but Rebecca hesitated, consulting her tablet. That conflicts with the Morrison presentation, and the Blackstone Group specifically requested a 4 p.m. slot for their portfolio review. Joshua processed the information rapidly, calculating time slots and priorities, like a chess master planning. Several moves ahead. The Henderson deal was worth $12 million, but Morrison represented ongoing quarterly revenue of $2 million per year, and Blackstone could potentially bring in $15 million if properly cultivated. Reschedule Morrison to tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., confirm Henderson for 3:30, and push Blackstone to 5 p.m. If they can't accommodate, offer them the 7 a.m. slot tomorrow, Joshua instructed while walking toward his office. Already anticipated that. "Solution, sir. Morrison agreed to tomorrow morning, but they want to review the quarterly projections tonight. I've arranged for the documents to be couriered to their office by 6 p.m. This was why Joshua paid Rebecca more than most companies paid their mid-level executives. She didn't just manage his schedule, she managed his success. Excellent. What else needs my attention before 3:30? Rebecca followed him into his office, consulting her tablet with practiced efficiency. "The Vancouver project needs your final approval on the risk assessment. The numbers look good, but they want your personal sign-off before proceeding. Also, your mother called. She wants to confirm Sunday dinner plans." Joshua settled behind his mahogany desk, a piece of furniture that had cost more than most people's annual salaries, but represented the kind of success he had worked 18-hour days to achieve. He pulled up the Vancouver project files on his computer while simultaneously checking the latest market reports. "Tell my mother I'll be there at 6 p.m. as planned. Get me the Vancouver risk assessment team on a conference call in 20 minutes. I want to hear their justification for the projected returns before I approve anything." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of strategic decisions and financial calculations. The Vancouver team presented solid arguments for their optimistic projections, though Joshua pushed them to justify every percentage point and timeline assumption. He approved the project, but insisted on additional safeguards that would protect his company's interests if market conditions shifted. The Morrison courier pickup was confirmed, the Henderson contracts were reviewed and perfected, and the Blackstone portfolio analysis was updated with the latest market data. By 3:15, Joshua felt the familiar satisfaction of having multiple complex deals moving forward simultaneously. Rebecca appeared in his doorway precisely at 3:20. "Sir, the Henderson Group is in the lobby. Security is escorting them up now." "Perfect. Timing. Make sure the conference room temperature is set to 68 degrees. Henderson mentioned he prefers cooler environments during our initial phone consultation." Joshua straightened his tie and checked his reflection in the window. The storm had passed, leaving Chicago's skyline gleaming under patches of emerging sunlight. From his elevated position, the city looked cleaned and renewed, ready for whatever challenges the afternoon might bring. The Henderson meeting began exactly as Joshua had planned. Richard Henderson arrived with his legal counsel and chief financial officer, all carrying leather portfolios that suggested serious intent to finalize the deal. The preliminary discussions moved smoothly through contract terms, payment schedules, and performance benchmarks. "Your risk mitigation strategies are impressive, Mitchell," Henderson observed, reviewing the bound contract documents. "I particularly appreciate the built-in flexibility for market fluctuations." Joshua leaned forward slightly, recognizing the moment when a deal shifts from negotiation to commitment. "We've learned that successful partnerships require adaptability. The luxury real estate market can be unpredictable, but our modeling accounts for various scenarios." Henderson's legal counsel whispered something in his ear, and Joshua waited patiently while they conferred. This was the crucial moment, the pause before either acceptance or additional demands. Joshua had navigated this particular tension hundreds of times, and experience had taught him that silence often worked better than additional persuasion. "We're prepared to move forward," Henderson announced after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. "However, we want to add a performance bonus clause. If you exceed the projected ROI by more than 5%, Meridian Financial receives an additional 2% of the total profits." Joshua's mind calculated the implications instantly. The bonus clause represented potential additional revenue of nearly $400,000 if they performed exceptionally well. More importantly, it demonstrated Henderson's confidence in their projections. "That's acceptable, provided we can include a similar protection clause if external market forces beyond our control impact performance," Joshua countered smoothly. The negotiations continued for another 45 minutes, with both sides refining details and addressing contingencies. Joshua found himself genuinely impressed by Henderson's thoroughness and professionalism. This wasn't just a business transaction. It was the beginning of what could become a long-term strategic partnership. As Henderson's team prepared to sign the final documents, Joshua's phone buzzed with an urgent text message. He glanced at it discreetly. "Emergency at the Riverside. Project. Need you here ASAP. Tom." Tom Fletcher was Joshua's most trusted project manager, responsible for overseeing construction financing for several major developments. If Tom considered something an emergency, it required immediate attention. Joshua maintained his professional composure while Henderson's team completed their signatures, but his mind was already shifting to whatever crisis awaited at the Riverside. Project, the timing couldn't have been worse, with the Blackstone meeting still scheduled for 5 p.m. "Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure doing business with you," Joshua said, standing and extending his hand to Henderson. "Rebecca will coordinate with your team to ensure smooth communication throughout the project timeline." After exchanging final handshakes and business cards, the Henderson Group departed, leaving Joshua with a signed $12 million contract. and a growing sense of urgency about Tom's emergency message. Rebecca appeared moments after the elevator doors closed behind Henderson's team. "Sir, Tom Fletcher has called 3 times in the last hour. He says it's urgent but wouldn't provide details over the phone." Joshua checked his watch. 4:35 p.m. The Blackstone meeting was in 25 minutes, but Tom's emergencies were never... "You false alarms, get me Tom on the phone now. If this is going to require my physical presence, we need to reschedule Blackstone immediately." Within seconds, Tom's voice came through the office speaker system. "Joshua, thank God, we have a serious problem at Riverside. The city inspector found structural issues with the foundation work. The entire project might be shut down pending a comprehensive engineering review." Joshua felt his stomach drop. The Riverside project represented a $16 million investment, with completion scheduled for next spring. A shutdown would not only delay revenue, but could potentially expose his company to lawsuit liability if the structural issues proved significant. "How serious are we talking, Tom?" "Serious enough that I've already contacted our insurance company and put our legal team on standby. The inspector is demanding a complete halt to all construction activities until an independent engineering firm can assess the foundation integrity." Joshua's mind raced through the implications. Construction delays meant penalty clauses, additional financing costs, and potential damage to his company's reputation. Worse, if the foundation issues were severe enough to require rebuilding, the project could become a financial disaster. "I'm leaving now," Joshua decided. "Cancel my 5 p.m. meeting and clear my evening schedule. We need to contain this situation before it escalates further." As he gathered his materials and prepared to leave, Joshua reflected on how quickly success could be threatened by unforeseen circumstances. The Henderson deal had been a triumph, but the Riverside crisis could potentially overshadow that victory, if not handled properly. The storm outside had cleared, but Joshua sensed that a different kind of tempest was just beginning. Joshua's black BMW M8 carved through Chicago's rush-hour traffic with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The leather interior was quiet, except for the low hum of the engine and the occasional vibration of his phone against the dashboard. Every red light felt like an eternity as his mind calculated the potential financial damage of the Riverside project crisis. The drive to the construction site normally took 25 minutes during peak hours, but Joshua's intimate knowledge of Chicago's street patterns allowed him to navigate through less congested routes. He had learned these shortcuts during his early days as a junior analyst, when he couldn't afford the luxury of being late to client meetings. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Tom Fletcher's name appeared on the dashboard display. "Joshua, where are you?" 15 minutes out. What's the latest update?" Tom's voice carried the strain of someone who had been dealing with crisis management for hours. The inspector finished his preliminary assessment. He's recommending a complete structural evaluation by an independent engineering firm before any work can resume. I've contacted 3 firms, but the earliest anyone can start is Monday morning. Joshua merged onto Lakeshore Drive, where the post-storm afternoon sun reflected off Lake Michigan's surface like scattered diamonds. Under normal circumstances, he might have appreciated the beauty, but today, the scenic route was simply the fastest path to damage control. "What about our timeline commitments to the investors?" "That's the real problem," Tom replied grimly. "We're looking at a minimum 2-week delay, possibly longer depending on what the engineers find. The penalty clauses kick in after 10 days. The mathematics were brutal. 2 weeks of construction delays would cost approximately $300,000 in penalty payments. If the structural issues required significant remediation, the financial impact could escalate into the millions. "I need you to prepare a worst-case scenario analysis," Joshua instructed while navigating around a delivery truck. Get me exact figures for every possible outcome, from minor delays to complete foundation reconstruction. Already working on it. I should have preliminary numbers by the time you arrive. Joshua ended the call and pressed the accelerator slightly harder. The BMW responded instantly, its engine note deepening as they moved through the urban landscape toward the construction site. This was the part of business that separated successful entrepreneurs from those who merely survived, the ability to transform crises into manageable challenges through decisive action and strategic thinking. The Riverside project had been one of Joshua's most ambitious ventures, a luxury residential complex designed to capitalize on Chicago's growing demand for high-end lakefront properties. The location was perfect, the architectural design was stunning, and the projected returns were substantial enough to attract significant investor interest. Now, a single inspector's report threatened to transform that success story into a cautionary tale about the dangers of aggressive construction timelines. Joshua's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Blackstone Group rescheduled for tomorrow, 10 a.m. Morrison confirmed for 8 a.m. Your mother called again about Sunday dinner. He voice texted back while stopped at a traffic light. Confirm both meetings. Tell my mother I'll call her tonight. The construction site came into view as Joshua turned onto Riverside Avenue. What should have been a bustling hub of activity looked eerily quiet, with orange cones and caution tape creating barriers around the main building foundation. Several workers stood in small groups, their body language suggesting frustration and uncertainty. Tom Fletcher's red pickup truck was parked near the site trailer, and Joshua could see him through the trailer's windows, hunched over what appeared to be architectural drawings. At 48, Tom had spent more than 2 decades managing construction projects, and his expertise had saved Joshua's company from numerous potential disasters over the years. Joshua parked next to the trailer and stepped out into the afternoon air. The storm had left the construction site muddy and partially flooded, with puddles reflecting the cloudy sky like mirrors scattered across the uneven ground. The smell of wet concrete and disturbed earth hung heavy in the humid atmosphere. "Tom," Joshua called as he approached the trailer, "show me what we're dealing with." Tom emerged from the trailer carrying a clipboard thick with official-looking documents and photographs. His usually confident demeanor seemed strained, and Joshua noticed mud stains on his work boots and jeans that suggested he had been personally inspecting the foundation issues. "It's not good, Joshua." The inspector found 3 separate areas where the concrete shows signs of improper curing. The rebar placement in the northeast corner doesn't match the approved specifications, and there's evidence of water infiltration in the basement level. They walked toward the cordoned-off foundation area, where Joshua could see the concrete structures that would normally be hidden once construction progressed. To his untrained eye, everything looked solid and professional. But he trusted Tom's expertise and the inspector's concerns. "How did this happen?" Joshua asked, studying the foundation work that represented months of planning and hundreds of thousands of dollars in materials and labor. Tom consulted his clipboard, flipping through several pages of documentation. The concrete contractor used a different mixing ratio than specified in the engineering plans. They claim it was a communication error with their supplier, but the inspector believes it was a cost-cutting measure. The rebar issue is more serious. That's a direct violation of building codes. Joshua processed this information while calculating the implications. Cost-cutting by subcontractors was a common problem in construction, but the financial responsibility ultimately fell on the primary developer, his company. "What are our legal options with the concrete contractor?" "Our contract includes specific performance guarantees and penalty clauses for code violations. We can recover some costs, but not enough to offset the delay penalties we'll face with." Our investors. A group of construction workers approached, led by the site foreman, Miguel Santos. Miguel had been with the project since groundbreaking, and Joshua respected his practical expertise and honest communication style. "Mr. Mitchell," Miguel said, removing his hard hat as he approached, "I wanted to personally apologize for this situation. My crew followed the specifications we were given, but the concrete contractor made changes without proper authorization." Joshua appreciated Miguel's directness. In his experience, the best solutions emerged from honest assessment of problems, rather than attempts to deflect responsibility. "Miguel, I need your honest opinion. If we had to rebuild the affected foundation areas, how long would that take?" Miguel looked toward the cordoned-off sections, mentally calculating the scope of work required. "Assuming we can get materials delivered quickly, we're looking at 3 to 4 weeks for complete remediation. That's if the weather cooperates and we don't encounter additional complications once we start excavation." The timeline was worse than Joshua had hoped, but not as catastrophic as he had feared. 4 weeks of delay would trigger significant penalty payments, but the project would remain financially viable if they could prevent further complications. Tom's phone rang, and he stepped away to take the call. Joshua used the moment to survey the entire construction site, mentally cataloguing everything that had been completed successfully and everything that would need to be redone or delayed. The Riverside project represented more than just financial investment. It was a symbol of his company's ability to execute complex development projects. Success here would open doors to even larger opportunities, while failure could damage relationships with key investors and limit future growth potential. Tom returned from his phone call with a mixture of concern and relief on his face. That was the insurance adjuster. "They're willing to cover the remediation costs under our contractor default policy, but they want their own engineering assessment before approving the claim." "How long for their assessment?" "They can have someone here Monday morning, same as the independent engineer. If both assessments align, we could have approval for remediation work by Wednesday." Joshua felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Insurance coverage would significantly reduce the financial impact, and a Wednesday start date for remediation meant they could potentially limit the delay to 3 weeks instead of 4. "Set up both assessments for Monday. I want our legal team present for all meetings and document everything for potential contractor liability claims." As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the construction site, Joshua realized that crisis management had consumed his entire afternoon. The successful Henderson deal felt like it had happened days ago rather than hours earlier. By 6:45 p.m., Joshua had spent nearly 3 hours at the construction site, coordinating damage control efforts and establishing protocols for the engineering assessments scheduled for Monday. The October sun was setting behind Chicago's skyline, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reflected off the puddles scattered across the muddy construction site. Tom Fletcher locked the site trailer while Joshua made final notes on his phone about the day's developments. The insurance adjuster had confirmed Monday morning availability, the independent engineering firm had been contracted, and contingency plans were in place for multiple remediation scenarios. "I'll be here at 7 a.m. Monday to meet with both assessment teams," Tom said, walking toward his pickup truck. "We should have a clearer picture of our options by noon." Joshua nodded, closing his phone and looking around the quiet construction. Site one final time. In the fading daylight, the foundation problems weren't visible, and the project looked like any other luxury development under construction. Appearances could be deceiving in business, just as they could be in life. "Good work today, Tom. Crisis management isn't glamorous, but it's what separates successful companies from failed ones." As Tom's truck disappeared down Riverside Avenue, Joshua realized he was genuinely hungry for the first time all day. The stress of managing multiple high-stakes situations had consumed his attention completely, and his body was finally demanding the nutrition it had been denied since his quick deli sandwich at lunch. Rather than driving directly home to his Lincoln Park penthouse, Joshua decided to stop at Romano's, a small Italian restaurant he had discovered during his early days building the company. The food was exceptional, the atmosphere was quiet enough for thinking, and the owner, Mrs. Romano, had a maternal way of ensuring he ate properly during stressful periods. The drive through downtown Chicago gave Joshua time to process the day's events. The Henderson deal represented a significant victory, generating $12 million in new business and establishing a partnership that could lead to additional opportunities. The Riverside crisis, while serious, appeared manageable with proper insurance coverage and careful remediation planning. As he navigated through the evening traffic, Joshua's phone rang with a call from his brother Marcus. "Hey, just checking on Sunday dinner plans. Mom's been cooking since this morning, convinced you're going to cancel at the last minute." Joshua smiled despite his exhaustion. Their mother, Eleanor Mitchell, had an uncanny ability to predict when his work obligations would interfere with family and commitments. Her concerns weren't entirely unfounded. He had missed 3 family dinners in the past 2 months due to business emergencies. "Tell Mom I'll be there. Nothing short of a natural disaster could keep me away from her lasagna." "Famous last words," Marcus laughed. "Sarah's making her chocolate cake, so you better not disappoint us." The mention of Sarah's chocolate cake reminded Joshua of simpler times, when his biggest concerns involved homework assignments and weekend plans rather than million-dollar construction crises and complex financial negotiations. Sometimes he wondered if the price of success was worth the constant pressure and responsibility. "I'll see you Sunday at 6 p.m. sharp," Joshua promised before ending the call. Romano's restaurant was located in a neighborhood that had undergone significant gentrification over the past decade. What had once been a working-class area filled with small family businesses was now transitioning into trendy boutiques and upscale dining establishments. Romano's had somehow survived the transformation, maintaining its authentic atmosphere. While adapting to changing demographics, Joshua parked across the street from the restaurant and stepped out into the cool evening air. The storm had cleared completely, leaving behind the crisp freshness that often followed severe weather. Streetlights were beginning to flicker on as dusk settled over the city, creating pools of warm light along the sidewalks. As he crossed the street toward Romano's, Joshua noticed a young woman sitting on the concrete steps of a closed storefront, about 50 feet from the restaurant. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with long dark hair that looked damp from the earlier rain. In her arms, she held what appeared to be a sleeping infant wrapped in a faded blue blanket. The woman's clothes looked worn and slightly too large, suggesting either poverty or recent weight loss. Her posture conveyed exhaustion and something that looked like desperation. She was looking down at the baby in her arms with an expression of tender concern that seemed at odds with her obvious distress. Joshua paused on the sidewalk, his business instincts telling him to continue toward the restaurant, while a different part of his consciousness registered the woman's apparent need. In his world of corporate negotiations and financial strategies, he rarely encountered direct human suffering. Problems were solved with contracts, insurance policies, and strategic planning, rather than immediate personal intervention. The woman looked up as several people walked past her on the sidewalk. Joshua could see her making eye contact with each passerby, her lips moving as if she was asking for something. Each person continued walking without stopping, some actively avoiding eye contact, others glancing briefly before hurrying on their way. A well-dressed couple emerged from a nearby boutique, laughing about their purchases and discussing dinner plans. The young woman shifted the baby to one arm and extended her free hand toward them, clearly asking for help. The couple's laughter stopped abruptly, and they crossed to the other side of the street without acknowledging her presence. Joshua watched this interaction with growing discomfort. The casual dismissal of someone in obvious need conflicted with values his parents had instilled in him during childhood, values that had somehow been buried under years of competitive business practices and financial ambition. An elderly man, walking a small dog, approached the woman next. She spoke to him quietly, and Joshua could see her gesturing toward the baby. The man shook his head firmly and continued walking, pulling his dog closer to his side, as if the woman represented some kind of threat. The pattern continued for several more minutes. Business people hurrying home from work, couples out for evening, entertainment, teenagers absorbed in their phones, all passing by the young woman as if she were invisible. Some glanced at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust, but none stopped to offer assistance. Joshua found himself frozen on the sidewalk, caught between his trained impulse to avoid complications and a growing sense that something important was happening in front of him. The baby in the woman's arms stirred slightly, making soft sounds that carried across the quiet street. The woman began to rock gently, whispering something to the infant that Joshua couldn't hear but could see was meant to be soothing. Her movements were careful and practiced, suggesting experience with caring for the child despite her obvious youth and difficult circumstances. A group of college students approached, laughing loudly about their evening plans. The young woman looked up hopefully as they passed, saying something that caused them to slow down momentarily. One of the students reached into his pocket, and Joshua thought he might offer money or assistance. Instead, the student shook his head, and the group continued walking, their laughter resuming as if nothing had happened. Joshua realized he had been standing motionless for nearly 10 minutes, watching this cycle of human indifference play out. In front of him, the woman had been ignored or dismissed by at least 15 people during that time, each rejection seeming to diminish her posture slightly more. The baby's soft sounds became more persistent, and the woman began to look around with increasing anxiety. She opened what appeared to be a small diaper bag beside her on the steps, searching through its contents with growing desperation. Whatever she was looking for wasn't there. Something about her expression, a mixture of love, fear, and determination, pierced through Joshua's emotional defenses in a way that boardroom presentations and profit margins never could. This wasn't a business problem that could be solved with strategic planning or financial resources. This was an immediate human need, playing out in real time just 50 feet from where he stood. Joshua looked down at his expensive suit, his Italian leather shoes, his Rolex watch that cost more than most people earned in months. The contrast between his obvious prosperity and the woman's desperate circumstances created a tension he had never experienced in his carefully controlled corporate environment. The woman looked up again as another pedestrian approached, hope flickering in her expression before being extinguished by yet another dismissive rejection. She pulled the baby closer to her chest and seemed to make a decision about something. Standing slowly from the concrete steps, she began walking toward the street corner with unsteady steps that suggested either exhaustion or malnutrition. The baby had begun to cry softly, and she was trying to comfort the child while managing the small bag and maintaining her balance. Joshua realized that in another few seconds she would disappear around the corner, and whatever was happening here would become someone else's responsibility or no one's responsibility at all. The moment demanded a decision that had nothing to do with profit margins or strategic planning, and everything to do with the kind of person he was beneath the expensive suits and corporate success. Joshua's feet moved before his mind fully processed the decision. He found himself walking across the street, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the damp pavement as he approached the young woman who was struggling to comfort her crying baby while gathering her belongings. "Excuse me," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman looked up with eyes that held a mixture of wariness and desperate hope. Up close, Joshua could see that she was probably no older than 22, with delicate features marked by exhaustion and stress. The baby in her arms appeared to be maybe 6 months old, with tiny fingers that gripped the edge of the faded blanket. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said quickly, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "I'm not asking for much, just my baby needs formula, and I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. I'm not some kind of scammer or anything. Her words trailed off as she noticed Joshua's expensive suit and watch. He could see her calculating whether this well-dressed businessman would be more or less likely to help than the casual passers-by who had already dismissed her. "What's your name?" Joshua asked, his voice gentler than he typically used in business conversations. The question seemed to surprise her. Maya Chen, and this is Emma." She looked down at the baby whose crying had softened to small whimpering. "Sounds! I'm Joshua," he replied, extending his hand in a gesture that felt both natural and strange given the circumstances. "When did you last have a proper meal, Maya?" Maya's eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away. 2 days ago, maybe 3. I've been giving Emma everything she needs, but..." She gestured helplessly at her own thin frame. Joshua felt something shift inside his chest, an emotion he couldn't immediately identify. In his corporate world, problems were solved with analysis and strategy. This was different. This was about immediate human need that required immediate human response. "Come with me," he said, indicating Romano's restaurant behind him. "Let's get you both fed and figure out what else you need." Maya's expression shifted from hope to suspicion. "I can't pay for restaurant food. I told you, I don't have any money." "I'm buying," Joshua said simply. No strings attached. The wariness in Maya's eyes intensified. Why, nobody just helps strangers without wanting something in return. The question caught Joshua off guard. In his business experience, every transaction involved mutual benefit and calculated risk. The concept of helping someone without expecting anything in return was so foreign to his usual thinking that he had to pause and examine his own motivations. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I just know that you need help, and I can provide it." Maya studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions. The baby began to fuss again, and she automatically began the gentle rocking motion that seemed to be second nature. "Emma's hungry," Maya said finally. "I have 1 bottle of formula left, but after that..." She didn't finish the sentence. Then, "Let's start there," Joshua said. "Romano's is quiet and Mrs. Romano has grandchildren. She'll understand." As they walked the short distance to the restaurant, Joshua found himself noticing details he had never paid attention to before. Maya's shoes were worn through at the soles, held together with what appeared to be duct tape. The diaper bag she carried was actually a plastic grocery bag with handles, and it looked nearly empty. The baby, Emma, had stopped crying but continued to make soft sounds that tugged at something in Joshua's chest. He had never spent much time around infants, but there was something universally compelling about the vulnerability of a child depending completely on adult care. Mrs. Romano looked up from behind the counter as they entered the restaurant, her experienced eyes immediately assessing the situation. At 72, she had seen enough of life to recognize need when it walked through her door. "Joshua, welcome back," she said warmly, then turned to Maya with maternal concern. "And who is this beautiful baby?" "Mrs. Romano, this is Maya, and..." "Emma," Joshua said. They could use a good meal and a quiet place to sit for a while. Mrs. Romano's expression softened even further as she approached Maya and the baby. Of course, of course. You sit right here by the window where it's warm. The little one, she is hungry? Maya nodded, tears threatening again at the kindness in the older woman's voice. She needs formula. I have one bottle, but I don't know where I can warm it. No problem at all, Mrs. Romano said, already moving toward the kitchen. I warm bottles for my granddaughter all the time. You give it to me and I'll have it ready in 2 minutes. As Maya handed over the bottle, Joshua guided her to a corner booth where they would have privacy. The restaurant was nearly empty, with only one other couple seated on the far side of the dining room. I don't understand why you're doing this, Maya said, as they settled into the booth. People have been walking past me all day like I'm invisible. Joshua considered her words while studying the menu he had memorized years ago. Maybe they just don't know how to help. Or maybe they don't want to get involved, Maya replied with a bitterness that seemed too mature for her age. It's easier to pretend people like me don't exist. Mrs. Romano returned with the warmed bottle and set it gently on the table. There you go, sweetheart, and I'm making you both my special pasta with meat sauce. You need to build your strength. Back up. As Maya fed Emma, Joshua found himself watching the interaction with fascination. The baby's complete trust in her mother, the careful way Maya positioned the bottle, the immediate change in Emma's demeanor from distress to content. It was a display of love and competence that contrasted sharply with Maya's obvious desperation. How long have you been on the street? Joshua asked gently. Maya's attention remained focused on Emma, but her voice carried the weight of recent trauma. 3 weeks. I was living with my boyfriend, Emma's father. But he started using drugs. Again, I couldn't stay there with the baby. It wasn't safe. Do you have a family you could stay with? My parents live in California, but we haven't spoken since I told them I was pregnant. They wanted me to give her up for adoption. Maya looked down at Emma with fierce protectiveness. I couldn't do that. She's my daughter. The simple statement carried enormous emotional weight. Joshua realized he was witnessing a level of love and sacrifice that existed completely outside his experience of achievement and success. Mrs. Romano appeared with 2 plates of pasta, the portions generous, enough to feed a small family. The aroma of garlic, herbs, and rich tomato sauce filled the space around their table. You eat, she instructed Maya firmly. The baby is content now, so you take care of yourself. Maya took her first bite with obvious hunger, then forced herself to eat slowly, as if she were afraid the food might disappear. Joshua found himself eating mechanically while watching her carefully controlled desperation. What did you do before this situation, he asked. I was studying business administration at DePaul University, Maya replied between bites. I had a partial scholarship and was working part-time at a bookstore. When I got pregnant, I thought I could manage everything, but the morning sickness was so bad I missed too many classes, lost my scholarship, lost my job, and then... She gestured around the restaurant as if to encompass everything that had led to this moment. Joshua felt an unexpected connection to her story. Business administration had been his major as well, though his path had been smoothed by family support and financial resources that Maya clearly lacked. What happened to your scholarship? Couldn't you defer for medical reasons? Maya's laugh held no humor. Have you ever tried to navigate university bureaucracy when you're 19, pregnant, and throwing up every morning? They have policies, but policies don't account for real-life complications. The observation struck Joshua as profoundly true. His entire career was built on policies, procedures, and systematic approaches to problems. But the young woman sitting across from him represented the kind of human complexity that didn't fit neatly into spreadsheets or strategic planning documents. Emma had finished her bottle and was now sleeping peacefully in Maya's arms. The contrast between the baby's contentment and Maya's obvious exhaustion was stark. "Where were you planning to sleep tonight?" Joshua asked. Maya's hesitation suggested she didn't have a good answer. "There's a shelter about 2 miles from here, but they don't always have space. If they're full, there's a 24-hour laundromat, where the manager sometimes lets people stay if they're quiet." The casual way she described these options revealed how quickly she had adapted to circumstances that would terrify most people. Joshua realized that while he was managing million-dollar construction crises, Maya was solving survival problems that were far more immediate and consequential. "That's not safe for you or Emma," he said. "Safe is a luxury I can't afford right now," Maya replied, with a pragmatism that was both impressive and heartbreaking. Joshua pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly, his business instincts kicking in as he processed Maya's situation. Within minutes, he had researched homeless shelters, women's assistance programs, and emergency housing options throughout Chicago. "The Harbor Light Women's Center has 24-hour intake," he said, showing Maya his phone screen. "They specifically help mothers with infants, and they have social workers who can connect you with longer-term resources." Maya looked at the information with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "I called them yesterday. They have a 3-week waiting list for beds, and emergency intake is only for women fleeing domestic violence situations." Joshua frowned at his phone, realizing that Google searches couldn't solve complex social problems the way they solved business challenges. "What about family services? There must be government programs." "I've been on waiting lists for 2 weeks, Maya interrupted gently. "Emergency assistance has been suspended due to budget cuts. Temporary housing vouchers are backed up for months. I know you're trying to help, but the system isn't designed for people who fall through the cracks." Her matter-of-fact tone revealed someone who had already exhausted the obvious solutions. Joshua felt his usual confidence in problem-solving beginning to crack as he encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved with money, connections, or strategic planning. Mrs. Romano approached their table with a concerned expression. "How? Is everything? The little one, she's sleeping well." "The food was wonderful, thank you," Maya said sincerely. "I can't remember the last time I had a home-cooked meal." Mrs. Romano's maternal instincts seemed to activate as she studied Maya's thin frame and the sleeping baby. "You are too skinny, both of you. This is not good for nursing mothers." Joshua watched the interaction between the two women, noting how Mrs. Romano's genuine concern contrasted with the clinical detachment he typically brought to problem-solving. There was something about direct human compassion that his business training hadn't prepared him to understand or replicate. "Mrs. Romano," Joshua said slowly, an idea beginning to form. "Do you know of any safe places where Maya and Emma could stay tonight, somewhere warm and secure?" The older woman's eyes brightened with sudden inspiration. "My daughter Rosa, she has an apartment above the bakery, 3 blocks from here. She is in Milwaukee this week visiting her husband's family. The apartment is empty, and it has everything a young mother would need." Maya looked between Joshua and Mrs. Romano with disbelief. "I couldn't impose like that. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Mrs. Romano said firmly. "I know you love your baby. You are trying to do the right thing and you need help. Sometimes life gives us chances to help each other." Joshua felt something shift in his understanding as he watched Mrs. Romano's immediate willingness to trust and assist a complete stranger. In his business world, every transaction required verification, documentation, and protection against potential risks. Yet here was a woman offering her family's resources based purely on human compassion. "I'll pay whatever rent or deposit Rosa normally charges," Joshua offered quickly. Mrs. Romano waved her hand dismissively. "No rent, no deposit. The apartment sits empty anyway. You just keep it clean and safe for the baby." Maya's eyes filled with tears that she could no longer contain. "I don't know how to thank you. Both of you. I was starting to think that kindness didn't exist anymore." Joshua found himself profoundly moved by her gratitude for something that cost him nothing but meant everything to her. In his corporate dealings, million-dollar transactions were treated as routine business, but this simple act of providing shelter felt more significant than any deal he had ever closed. "What about baby supplies?" he asked, his analytical mind automatically cataloging practical needs. "Formula, diapers, clothes?" Maya's expression grew anxious again. "I have enough diapers for maybe 2 days and one more bottle of formula. After that—" She shrugged helplessly. Joshua stood up abruptly, startling both women. "There's a pharmacy 2 blocks away that stays open until midnight. Let's make a list of everything Emma needs." "I can't let you buy all that," Maya protested. "You've already done too much." "Consider it an investment," Joshua said, then immediately regretted the business terminology. Consider it the right thing to do. As they walked through the pharmacy aisles 30 minutes later, Joshua discovered how little he knew about infant care. Maya guided him through the bewildering array of formula options, diaper sizes, and baby care products with expertise that impressed him. "Emma's sensitive to dairy-based formulas, so we need the hypoallergenic kind," she explained, reading labels carefully. "And she's growing fast, so I should probably get the next size up in diapers." Joshua watched her calculate quantities and compare prices with the precision of someone who had learned to make every dollar count. When she reached for the generic store-brand formula instead of the name-brand option, he quietly added the higher-quality version to their cart. "You don't have to get the expensive stuff," Maya said, noticing his addition. "Emma deserves the best," Joshua replied, surprising himself with how naturally the sentiment came. They filled the cart with formula, diapers, baby food, bottles, clothes, in multiple sizes, blankets and basic toiletries. At the checkout counter, the total came to $437, an amount that Joshua would normally spend on a single business lunch without thinking twice. As they loaded the supplies into his BMW, Maya turned to him with an expression of wonder and confusion. "Why are you doing all this? Really? You could have walked past me like everyone else." Joshua considered the question while arranging formula cans in his trunk. "Honestly, I don't know. A few hours ago I was worried about construction, delays, and investor meetings. Now—" He gestured at the supplies, at Emma sleeping peacefully in Maya's arms, at the completely unexpected turn his evening had taken. "Now what?" Maya prompted gently. "Now I realize I've been so focused on building success that I forgot what success is supposed to accomplish." The observation came from somewhere deeper than his usual business philosophy, touching on questions he had never allowed himself to examine too closely. What was the point of financial achievement if it existed in isolation from human connection and meaningful impact? Mrs. Romano met them at the bakery with keys to Rosa's apartment and a bag of leftover pasta for Maya's breakfast. The apartment was small but clean, with a comfortable couch, a functional kitchen, and most importantly, a safe environment for Emma. "The hot water works well, and there are clean sheets in the closet," Mrs. Romano explained, while Maya explored the space with obvious relief. "You stay as long as you need to get back on your feet." As they settled Emma into a makeshift crib using pillows and blankets, Joshua found himself reluctant to leave. The evening had challenged every assumption he held about success, responsibility, and the nature of meaningful achievement. "What will you do tomorrow?" he asked Maya as she organized the baby supplies they had purchased. "Look for work, I suppose. Try to find childcare I can afford. Figure out how to rebuild my life." She paused, looking around the apartment with gratitude. "This gives me time to think and plan instead of just surviving day to day. Joshua realized that his simple act of intervention had created possibilities that hadn't existed a few hours earlier. Maya now had shelter, supplies, and most importantly, the mental space to focus on solutions rather than immediate survival. "I could help you look for work," he offered impulsively. "I know people in various industries, and you have business." "Education." Maya studied his face carefully. "Why would you want to stay involved? You've already done more than anyone could reasonably expect." The question forced Joshua to examine motivations he didn't fully understand himself. Something about Maya's combination of strength and vulnerability, her obvious intelligence and fierce love for Emma, had created an emotional investment that transcended his usual calculations of cost and benefit. "Maybe because helping you feels more important than anything I accomplished in the office today," he said honestly. The admission surprised them both with its sincerity and its implications for everything Joshua thought he knew about purpose and priorities. 3 months later, Joshua stood in the same conference room where he had closed the Henderson deal, but everything felt different. The mahogany table, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the precisely arranged presentation materials, they all seemed less important than they had that October afternoon when his life changed forever. Maya Chen sat across from him, wearing a professional, navy blue suit he had helped her select for job interviews. Her hair was styled neatly, her posture confident, and her eyes held a brightness that had been missing during their first encounter on that rainy evening. In her hands, she held a signed contract that would change both their lives. "I still can't believe this is real," Maya said, looking down at the document that officially made her Meridian Financial's newest junior analyst. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in laundromats. Now I'm working for one of Chicago's most prestigious financial consulting firms." Joshua smiled, remembering the countless hours they had spent over the past 3 months, reviewing business fundamentals, preparing for interviews, discussing career strategies, while Emma played with toys scattered across Maya's small apartment. What had begun as simple charity had evolved into genuine mentorship and eventually into something resembling family. "You earned this position on your own merit," Joshua said firmly. "I provided recommendations, but you impressed the hiring committee with your analytical skills and financial knowledge. The fact that you did all this while caring for Emma makes it even more remarkable." Emma, now 9 months old and crawling, with determined enthusiasm, was currently in the office daycare center that Joshua had convinced the company to establish. The benefit officially supported work-life balance for all employees, but privately, Joshua knew it had been designed to make Maya's employment possible. Rebecca knocked on the conference room door and entered with her characteristic efficiency. "Mr. Mitchell, the board meeting has been moved to 3 p.m., and Maya, HR needs you to complete your orientation paperwork by close of business today." "Thank you, Rebecca," Maya said with the professionalism she had rapidly developed during her transition back into the business world. After Rebecca left, Joshua and Maya sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The apartment above Mrs. Romano's bakery had become Maya's permanent home, with Rosa deciding to stay in Milwaukee permanently to be closer to her grandchildren. Mrs. Romano had effectively adopted Maya as another daughter, providing the kind of family support that had been missing from her life. "I have something to tell you," Maya said, her tone shifting to something more personal. "I got a call from my parents yesterday." Joshua looked up with interest. Maya's relationship with her family had been one of the ongoing challenges they had discussed during their many conversations over coffee and late-night feeding sessions with Emma. They saw the article about the company daycare center in the Chicago Tribune. "The one that mentioned my story," Maya continued. "My mother called to congratulate me on the job and to apologize for how they handled my pregnancy. The article had been Rebecca's idea, a public relations piece highlighting Meridian Financial's commitment to supporting working mothers. Joshua had been reluctant to publicize Maya's story, but she had insisted that it might help other women in similar situations. "How do you feel about that?" Joshua asked gently. "Complicated," Maya admitted. "They want to visit next month to meet Emma. Part of me is excited, but part of me is still angry about being abandoned when I needed them most." Joshua understood the complexity of family relationships that couldn't be easily repaired with good intentions and apologies. His own family dynamics had improved dramatically since he had begun prioritizing personal connections over professional obligations. Sunday dinners with his parents and Marcus had become sacred time that no business emergency could interrupt. "Whatever you decide about your parents, you have support here," Joshua said. "Mrs. Romano, me, the people at this company, you've built a new kind of family." Maya smiled, the expression transforming her face in a way that still amazed Joshua. The frightened, desperate young woman he had met 3 months ago had been replaced by someone confident, capable, and genuinely happy. "Speaking of family," Maya said with a mischievous look, "Mrs. Romano keeps asking when you're going to find a nice girl and settle down. She thinks all this work success is meaningless if you don't have someone to share it with." Joshua laughed, a sound that had become much more frequent since Maya and Emma had entered his life. "Mrs. Romano has very strong opinions about my personal life. She's been trying to set me up with her neighbor's daughter for weeks." "Maybe she has a point," Maya said thoughtfully. "You've taught me that success means more than just financial achievement. Maybe it's time you applied that lesson to your own life." The observation struck Joshua as profoundly true. His relationship with Maya and Emma had shown him the satisfaction that came from meaningful human connections, from being needed for more than his business expertise and financial resources. But romantic relationships still felt complicated and uncertain compared to the clear purpose he had found in helping Maya rebuild her life. "I've been thinking about that," Joshua admitted, "but honestly, helping you and Emma has been the most fulfilling thing I've done in years. I'm not sure I'm ready to complicate that with dating." Maya reached across the table and touched his hand briefly, a gesture that had become natural between them over the months of shared challenges and mutual support. "Joshua, you saved my life and Emma's life, but you can't make us your entire world. We want you to be happy, not just helpful." Before Joshua could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Tom Fletcher. "Riverside project passed final inspection, ahead of schedule and under budget. Henderson wants to discuss 3 more developments." The irony wasn't lost on Joshua that his greatest professional success in years had occurred while he was distracted by personal commitments that had nothing to do with profit margins or strategic planning. Somehow, caring about Maya and Emma had made him better at everything else, not worse. "Good news?" Maya asked, noticing his expression. "The Riverside project is officially complete. Remember that construction crisis I was dealing with the night we met? It turned out better than anyone expected." Maya grinned with genuine pleasure at his success. "That's wonderful. Are you going to celebrate?" Joshua considered the question, realizing that his idea of celebration had fundamentally changed. 3 months ago, he would have marked professional victories with expensive dinners at exclusive restaurants or weekend trips to luxury resorts. Now, the thought of sharing pizza with Maya and playing with Emma while she tried to crawl across his living room floor seemed infinitely more appealing. "I was thinking we could have dinner at Romano's tonight," he said. "Mrs. Romano has been working on a new recipe she wants us to try, and Emma loves the way the afternoon light comes through those big windows." "That sounds perfect," Maya agreed. Simple celebrations with people who matter. As they gathered their materials and prepared to leave the conference room, Joshua reflected on how completely his definition of success had been transformed. The Henderson deal, the Riverside project, the growing reputation of Meridian Financial, these achievements still mattered, but they no longer defined his sense of purpose or personal worth. What mattered now was Emma's laugh when he made silly faces during feeding time. What mattered was Maya's growing confidence as she rebuilt her career and her life. What mattered was Mrs. Romano's proud smile when she watched Maya and Emma together, treating them like the daughters she had never had. Ready for your first day as a Meridian Financial employee? Joshua asked as they walked toward the elevator. Ready for anything, Maya replied, with the kind of certainty that came from surviving the worst and discovering that kindness, when it appeared, could change everything. As the elevator descended toward the daycare center, where Emma was probably charming the staff with her newly developed clapping skills, Joshua realized that the most important deal he had ever closed wasn't worth $12 million or even $1,200. It was worth a single moment of human connection on a rainy evening when he chose to stop walking and start caring. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. Success, he now understood, wasn't about what you achieved for yourself. It was about what you made possible for others, and in helping Maya and Emma build their future, Joshua had finally discovered his own. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.